You know, there are some names that just become legends, right? They're basically shorthand for mystery itself. And when you talk about the history of the sea, no name echoes with more chilling questions than the Mary Celeste. For almost 150 years, it's been the ultimate ghost ship. So let's dive in and really try to separate the cold, hard facts from all the fiction. Okay, so let's set the scene. The date is December 4th, 1872. We're out in the middle of the vast, empty Atlantic Ocean, somewhere between the Azores and the coast of Portugal. And there's a ship, a Canadian brigantine called the De Gracia, just making its way towards Gibraltar. So, the crew of the De Gracia, they spot another ship out on the horizon. But something's off. It's sailing erratically. As they get closer, they can see its sails are torn up, but they're still set. They shout out a hail once, then again, nothing. Just silence. So they decide to board the ship. And what they find is just bizarre. The ship's in pretty good shape, the cargo's all there, but it is completely, totally empty. Not a soul on board. The name on the ship? The Mary Celeste.
Think about that. 10 people. Not just a crew, but a captain, his wife, and their little 2-year-old daughter. Just gone. Vanished. Without a trace. I mean, this is the question that has fueled more than a century of myths, legends, and thankfully, some actual scientific investigation. So, what really happened out there?
Right, so before it became this legendary ghost ship, the Mary Celeste was something else entirely. It was a family's home on the water and a captain's proud new investment. And to really get a grip on this mystery, we have to go back and understand the people involved. And let's be clear, this wasn't some reckless thrill-seeker or a rookie captain who got in over his head. Captain Benjamin Briggs was the real deal, a super experienced, well-respected sailor. He was a family man, known for being fair, responsible, a religious guy, and this is key. He was a man who knew the sea inside and out. He knew the dangers. And this quote, this just perfectly captures the feeling on that ship. Right before they set sail, Captain Briggs wrote this letter to his mom. It's just full of warmth, you know? Love for his wife Sarah and his little girl Sophia. He's happy with his ship, happy with his crew. The point is, this was not a voyage that started off with any sense of doom or gloom. Okay, so let's just run through the basic facts of the voyage. They leave New York on November 7th, 1872, headed for Genoa, Italy. On board, you've got Captain Briggs, his wife Sarah, and their 2-year-old daughter Sophia, plus a hand-picked crew of 7 top-notch sailors. He was so confident in this trip and this crew that he brought his family along. And then there's the cargo. And this detail is everything, as you'll see. They were carrying 1,701 barrels of industrial alcohol. All right, let's jump back to that moment of discovery. Picture it. The crew of the De Gracia steps onto this silent ship, and they've basically just walked into one of the most baffling crime scenes in all of history. Or at least, that's what it looked like at first. And the clues they find, they just don't add up. They're totally contradictory. For starters, the ship was seaworthy, but it had about 3.5 feet of water in the hold. Not great, but nowhere near sinking. Then, one of the water pumps was taken apart, like someone was in the middle of fixing it. The captain's really important navigational tools, his sextant and chronometer, were gone. But get this, his personal stuff was all there. And the biggest clue of all? The ship's only lifeboat was missing. A pretty clear sign they evacuated, and the last thing written in the ship's log was from 10 days earlier.
Yeah, and this is where it gets really weird. I mean, look at this breakdown. What's missing? All 10 people. The lifeboat, the navigation tools, and the ship's register. But what was left behind? All the crew's personal belongings, including their money, 6 months' worth of food and water, and the entire cargo of alcohol, which was worth a lot. Even the captain's sword was still under his bed. So right away, you can pretty much rule out pirates. This wasn't a robbery. Something else, something much stranger was going on here.
So the crew of the De Gracia manages to sail the Mary Celeste all the way to Gibraltar, and that's where the official investigation kicks off. But right from the get-go, the whole thing was kind of doomed. Why? Because the guy in charge seemed way more interested in a juicy, dramatic story than he wasn't looking at the actual evidence. So this guy, the Attorney General, Frederick Sully Flood, he was totally convinced he had it all figured out. His big theory? The crew got drunk on the cargo, went on a murderous rampage, killed the Briggs family, and then took off. But here's the thing. His theory completely fell apart. Problem number 1. The cargo was industrial alcohol. It was literally poison. You couldn't drink it. And problem number 2, he pointed to some suspicious stains on a sword, but when they were actually analyzed, nope, not blood. His whole case just crumbled.
So, with that official theory completely debunked, the Mary Celeste basically sailed out of the realm of fact and straight into legend. There was this huge information vacuum. And you know what fills a vacuum? Wild speculation. The floodgates of crazy theories were about to open.
And this is where the story really gets twisted. You've probably heard the fictional versions, right? Warm meals were still on the table. The tea was still steaming in their mugs. It makes for a great story, suggesting they vanished into thin air. But the reality, the fact, it was a lot less dramatic. The ship was wet and messy, sure, but that's what happens when you're adrift for 10 days. There were absolutely no signs that they had just disappeared in a supernatural puff of smoke.
And, of course, without any real answers, people's imaginations just ran wild. Pirates, a giant sea monster, a kraken that dragged them all to the bottom, a bloody mutiny, even though the crew had a fantastic reputation. You name it, someone probably suggested it. But here's the bottom line. The physical evidence on that ship just didn't support any of those wild theories. Not a single one. The cargo was untouched, so nope, not pirates. There was no sign of a struggle, so mutiny or murder seems incredibly unlikely. The truth had to be something stranger, but at the same time, a lot more logical.
And that, finally, brings us to what is now the most widely accepted explanation. It's a theory that really connects all the dots. All those weird clues, like the missing lifeboat, the hatches being blown open, and of course that very volatile cargo of industrial alcohol.
Okay, so let's walk through what most likely happened, step by step. First, remember those 1,700 barrels? It turns out some of them were made from porous oak, which meant they could leak flammable alcohol fumes. So you have this gas building up in the ship's hold. Second, some kind of spark ignites those fumes. Maybe it was just two metal barrel hoops rubbing together. Now, this doesn't cause a huge fire. Instead, it triggers what's called a pressure wave explosion. It's a terrifying boom that blows the ship's hatches wide open. So Captain Briggs, hearing this, thinks a much bigger, ship-destroying explosion is coming any second. He makes a split-second decision, a temporary evacuation. They all pile into the lifeboat, but they attach it to the ship with a tow line. The plan is just to wait at a safe distance. But then, the final, tragic step. That tow line snaps. And just like that, they're in a tiny boat lost to the massive, stormy Atlantic.
But wait a minute. I know what you're thinking. This was always the biggest problem with the explosion theory, wasn't it? I mean, if there was a blast so scary it made a veteran captain abandon his ship, where are the scorch marks? Where's the soot? Where's the fire damage? For decades, that one question kept this mystery totally unsolved.
Well, here's the amazing scientific answer that cracked the case. A scientist named Dr. Andrea Sella at University College London actually recreated the conditions in his lab. And he proved that when you ignite alcohol fumes in a closed space, you get this pressure wave explosion. As he put it, you get a spectacular wave of flame, but right behind it is cool air. So there's no soot, no charring, no scorch marks. It's basically a smokeless, fireless explosion, a blast without the burn. It explained everything.
So you see, this totally reframes the entire mystery. The story of the Mary Celeste isn't really about ghosts or sea monsters or aliens. It's just a tragic, all-too-human story about a calculated risk that went horribly wrong. The real mystery isn't how they got off the ship. It's what happened to that small lifeboat with 10 people inside, adrift in the immense and stormy Atlantic.
And that's really the final question I want to leave you with. Just try to put yourself in Captain Briggs' shoes for a second. You're out there responsible for your crew, but also for your wife and your 2-year-old daughter. You hear and feel this terrifying blast coming from a hold that you know is packed with 1,700 barrels of explosive material. In that one split second, is leaving the ship an act of panic, or is it the most prudent, responsible thing you could possibly do? All the evidence tells us it was a logical choice that was just undone by one single tragic moment, a snapped rope, that sealed their fate and gave the world its greatest maritime mystery.